What a year 2025 has been for South Africa. From breakthrough moments that gave us hope to challenges that tested our resilience, this year has been nothing short of eventful. Now, let's take a journey through the defining moments of 2025, the stories that shaped our national conversation, the developments that impacted our daily lives, and the turning points that may well influence our future for years to come. Now, we've witnessed significant progress in the fight against corruption, with billions of rands that have been recovered from state capture cases. We've watched our government work tirelessly to restore South Africa's reputation on a global stage, particularly with our efforts to exit the FATF grey list. We've celebrated victories, confronted setbacks, and we've continued the hard work of building a better South Africa. What do these stories tell us about where we are as a nation? What lessons can we draw? And perhaps most importantly, what do they mean for the road ahead? I think everyone has written about this. They've spoken about it. They've been interviewed on the topic already, but we are off the grey list. After 32 months of being on the list and the relevant stakeholders, especially the FIC, working tirelessly to get us through, we've succeeded. However, the road ahead means hard work. Getting off the grey list was merely business as usual. Now we have to maintain that momentum. We've got to drive change and make sure that we are meeting our FICA obligations. The next mutual evaluation in 2026, 2027 means that we must have a clean bill of health. Because if you didn't know, a country may be grey listed more than once. There was really some big news that made South African headlines this year by way of money laundering and terrorist financing crimes. The human trafficking case that saw 7 Chinese nationals being convicted of 158 charges linked to a sweatshop that they were running out of the Johannesburg CBD, so around the corner from most of you. They were sentenced to 20 years behind bars. A raid of the Village Deep premises of their company called Beautiful City uncovered 91 undocumented Malawian nationals, and among them 37 children living and working in shocking conditions. Over and above the human trafficking, they were convicted of debt bondage and contravening the country's labor and immigration laws. The victims in this case were locked up with armed security guards stationed at the gates in order to prevent them from escaping. They were forced to work 11-hour shifts, 7 days a week, and below minimum wage, and then threatened with a firearm and even assaulted if they disobeyed these orders. Their pay was docked if they took sick days, and the only shop that they had access to was within the actual company premises or compound, and the exorbitant prices for basic goods made it impossible for them to survive. Many of them were maimed and seriously injured while using dangerous machinery that they were not trained to operate. Another case that rocked South Africa was the one of little Jocelyn Smith. Raquel Smith, also known as Kelly Smith, was convicted of a life sentence for kidnapping and human trafficking her daughter, Jocelyn Smith. The 35-year-old mother of 3 was convicted and also sentenced along with her boyfriend and a friend of theirs. Let me tell you, even the court interpreter could not hold back her tears as she translated the victim impact statements into English. Little Jocelyn went missing on the 19th of February 2024, and it caused shockwaves across the country. Criminologists and Missing Children South Africa likened it to the case of Madeleine McCann, a British girl who went missing in Portugal in 2007. Now, if you're around my age, you would have also followed it the way I did. Madeleine's disappearance remains unsolved till this day. Police have said that the case remains open and they will continue to search for Jocelyn, even across international borders, as her body was never found. The National Prosecuting Authority welcomed the sentence and lauded the work of its team in proving that Jocelyn was sold and delivered to an intended buyer for the purpose of exploitation, namely slavery or practices similar to slavery. Now, during the trial, the identity of the intended buyer was never revealed. One witness who did come forward claimed that Jocelyn's mother confessed to have sold her to a sangoma for her eyes and her skin. And as we are South Africans, we do understand what a sangoma is. Now, why do these cases matter? Why am I bringing it up? What is human trafficking, and why should you, as an accountable institution, even care about these cases? Well, the topic is a global issue. Millions are trapped in modern day slavery, with forced labor and sexual exploitation being the most common form. Human trafficking occurs everywhere, but people are mainly trafficked from lower income to higher income countries. Most victims of cross-border trafficking come from Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, and also from South and East Asia. Human trafficking is the recruitment, it's the transportation, transfer, harboring, and receipt of people by force, fraud, or deception to exploit them for a profit. Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes, along with drugs and arms trafficking, and is a highly profitable business, generating an estimated 150 billion US dollars in profits each year. Human trafficking manifests in many forms. Now, the United Nations Office of Drug Control's latest research shows us that 38.7% of victims are trafficked for sexual exploitation, which takes place on the streets. It takes place in brothels, massage centers, hotels, and even bars that you might frequent. The victims, mainly women and young girls, often experience extreme violence and severe abuse. A further 38.8% are exploited for forced labor. Some people work long hours in factories for minimal to even no pay, producing clothes, computers, or phones. Others work on fields, plantations, or fishing boats, often in harsh weather and harsh circumstances, cultivating corn, rice, and wheat, harvesting coffee or cocoa beans, or even just catching fish. Around 10% are compelled to engage in illegal activities, and this includes pickpocketing, snatching of your bag, begging, and even selling of drugs. Other forms of exploitation include forced marriage, organ removal, and domestic servitude. Not only is human trafficking a human rights issue, but when these crimes are committed and the funds start to flow within your bank accounts, it legitimizes the act of these heinous crimes. The convictions in these cases that I've mentioned just now are big wins for such crimes, but it's often to the detriment of our lost victims. So the Tembisa Hospital fraud is a case that really pulls at the heartstrings and also angers a lot of South Africans when we talk about it. The Special Investigating Unit, or the SIU, has uncovered 2 billion rand of stolen money from Tembisa Hospital through 3 key syndicates enabled by junior officials at the institution and in the Gauteng Health Department. The money was intended for the provision of health care to the most vulnerable, but instead it was ruthlessly siphoned off through a complex web of fraud and corruption, representing an egregious betrayal of the nation's trust. Now, this was a sentiment that was echoed by the SIU head, Andy Motibi. Key officials from the Gauteng Department of Health and the hospital are accused of benefiting from corrupt payments that facilitated the irregular appointment of service providers, involving money laundering and fraud through fronting and the use of false supply chain management documentation. The total value of corrupt payments linked to the officials amounted to just over 122 million rand. Outer notes that 2 major enforcement operations currently unfolding in South Africa. So it's the raid on the suspended Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya's home and the tender mogul Hangwani Maumela. Now, these developments are stark evidence of how corruption continues to infect the state and at every level. The Sibiya raid forms part of an investigation that's linked to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, and I've told you what the commission's about. These claims cut to the heart of South Africa's law enforcement crisis. When the police themselves are compromised, accountability becomes impossible. Separately, the SIU's raids on Maumela's property properties, including his luxury Sandton mansion and a car dealership in Mpumalanga, mark a major step in the investigation into the looting of Tembisa Hospital. The scandal was first exposed by murdered whistleblower Babita Deokaran, revealed how politically connected business people siphoned more than 2 billion rand through irregular tenders, while the hospital itself struggled with medicine shortages and even failing infrastructure. According to the SIU, Mamela used a network of 41 companies to extract 820 million rand in 2 years. Law enforcement descended upon Mamela's 3-story mansion in Sandton, where a number of luxury cars had been confiscated. Now, News 24 also revealed that Mamela was also pursuing a new 1 billion rand food supply tender in the Northwest via his company Alu Construction and Supply, which allegedly submitted fraudulent BEE certificates within its bid. So what does my long-winded Tembisa Hospital scandal taught us? With the exception of stirring outrage and anger in us, it's taught us that proper customer due diligence matters. Transaction monitoring matters. Where is the money coming from? Where is the money going? Have you monitored this? Have you established who your ultimate beneficial owner is? When a juristic person is transacting with you, have you established who your UBOs are as well as your related parties? Have you risk rated them? Have you screened your UBOs and your related parties for political and sanctions exposure? Where the risk rating is higher or where there is political exposure, have you applied an enhanced due diligence? Did you look at any of the adverse media that might have been returned to you? Were any of these adverse media hits perhaps used toward a relevant report that you might have made to the FIC? Every step in the customer due diligence process matters, and you can see why, especially with the Tembisa Hospital case. So now with the news headlines that we've just looked at, we can see that the FIC have been very busy. The FIC's efforts to deepen its operational partnerships, such as the reformed Fusion Center, the Asset Recovery Hub, and the South African Anti-Money Laundering Integrated Task Force, have enabled it to be more effective in its delivery of its mandate. So let's move on to real-life fines. Now, a quick search of FICA or FSCA imposed fines will mostly bring up failings in creating and implementing a risk management and compliance return. I'm going to refer to it as an RMCP going forward. However, failing to curate and implement an RMCP was further echoed by the mad rush for RMCP submissions earlier this year. And you'll be familiar when accountable institutions were given a couple of days only to urgently submit their documents by the 12th of March. Companies were flustered, anxiety levels were on the rise, and many companies were left without an RMCP and unable to fulfill the submission request. The storm has passed, but the damage may be just the beginning. With the 12th of March deadline for submitting that RMCP now behind us, accountable institutions that failed to comply could be in the FIC's crosshairs. This is more than just a missed admin task. It's a warning that the FIC is watching and non-compliance could carry real consequences, and they already have. As part of its compliance obligations under the FIC Act, all accountable institutions are required to develop and implement an RMCP. Now, this is an apex policy document which sets out the compliance obligations of accountable institutions, as well as its risk-based approach to dealing with and mitigating inherent and residual risk. The major risk for accountable institutions that did not submit by that deadline is that it will constitute an act of non-compliance, which may invite an audit from the FIC and even possible penalties and fines. Not having an RMCP that is fully aligned with the legal requirements will also constitute non-compliance with the FIC Act. Then we saw the banking giant Standard Bank had been hit with a 13 million rand penalty by the SARB due to non-compliance with certain provisions of the FIC Act. The instances of their non-compliance included failure to conduct ongoing due diligence in respect of two of its clients, with no due diligence reviews undertaken in 2018 and 2019. It did not keep a record of the dates on which 43 suspicious and unusual transaction and activity reports were submitted to the FIC. The bank did not timeously report just over 1,000 cash transaction reports, nor did they report just over 17,000 suspicious transactions and unusual activity incidences. In addition, Standard Bank did not timeously attend to just over 75,000 automated transaction monitoring system alerts within 48 hours. Now, this is under Directive 5. And if you're a smaller institute and you do not have excessive outgoing incoming funds, then you do not need to comply with the directive. So you'll find that mostly banks and certain sized FSPs will have a transaction monitoring system. The bank also took longer than the 15-day reporting period for just over 94,000 suspicious transactions and unusual activity. So let's keep going. According to the FSCA, it conducted an inspection at Sanlam Collective Investments in March of 2024 as part of its ongoing supervisory activities under FICA, and found that the company was in breach of the following provisions. So while Sanlam developed an RMCP, just like Standard Bank, it was not effectively implemented, particularly regarding the risk rating of its clients. It did not have processes in place for enhanced due diligence on partnerships, so a specific entity type. Examining complex or unusually large transactions, termination of business relationships, identification and reporting of reportable transactions, justification for inapplicable Section 42 requirements, also failures when it came to the identification and the verification of clients and their beneficial owners. They didn't conduct ongoing customer due diligence, so it appears again, or take steps and consider filing a report if no customer due diligence can be conducted fully. Also, an enhanced customer due diligence on politically exposed persons was not carried out. Now, in the same week as Sanlam Collective Investments received their fine, the SARB had imposed an administrative sanction on the Zimbabwean-based Access Forex, which is an authorized dealer in foreign exchange with limited authority. Now, based in Harare, Access Forex deals with the movement of money from South Africa, the UK, and Zimbabwe. The SARB said that the administrative sanctions were imposed because of specific weaknesses that were detected in Access Forex control measures that inhibited it. It also failed to reflect essential provisions of the FIC Act within its RMCP. The company also failed to verify and identify some of its customers, and they failed to provide adequate training to their employees. So what guidance was issued this year? And just so that you're aware, all guidance may be found on the FIC's website. Directive 3A dealt with the requirement for notification to the FIC of failure to report. Similarly, Public Compliance Communication, or PCC 50A, was created to provide guidance to reporters on the measures required for the mitigation of lost intelligence data due to reporting failures, which includes the remediation and the prevention of reporting failures. Draft PCC 118A that was published for the consultation on the money and value transfer service provider sector. Guidance Note 7A, this replaces Guidance Note 7. That included an update to Chapter 7. Then, as you know, later in the year, but not documented in the current FIC report, was the additional update to Guidance Note 7A, and we playfully refer to this as Guidance Note 7AA. And this guidance note speaks to the governance requirements. So we do encourage you to make sure that the highest authority within your business is clearly defined in your RMCP, and they are also familiar with their FICA obligations. Draft PCC 23A, also in consultation on the interpretation of credit providers. Now, we're often asked about this PCC, and the FIC do not only recognize those businesses who are registered with the National Credit Regulator. So I really do encourage you to have a look at this PCC and understand it fully to make sure that if you are registered, if you meet any of these criteria, that you register accordingly on FIC's Go AML. Directive 9 was prescribed information to be submitted as part of transactions involving crypto asset service providers. And then finally, the PCC that caused the most debate was PCC 59. It provided guidance on beneficial ownership, including risk factors and alerts related to the identification of beneficial owners. Now, this was where that 5% threshold in UBO calculations was introduced versus the previous 25% threshold. And again, this 5% was a strong recommendation by the FIC for implementation. So this PCC replaced PCC 121 and draft PCC 121A. Reflecting on South Africa's journey through 2025, it's clear that this year has been one of both challenge and opportunity for our nation. We've witnessed significant developments across the regulatory landscape, economic policy shifts, and evolving compliance requirements that have reshaped how businesses operate. Proactive compliance, robust risk management, and strategic adaptation will continue to be critical success factors for organizations navigating South Africa's dynamic compliance landscape in 2026.